We're on now.
Some, yeah, exactly.
You sure? Now?
Or we could do nothing. And
Please talk amongst yourselves.
Testing
Can
out.
I borrow your testing for 1 minute, mate?
we testing.
Oh, you're right.
No.
I'm just generating banter.
Oh, are you okay?
Not to tip it.
Okay, get rid of this.
That might do, I think.
Thank you very much. No other declarations of interest, anybody?
So Al's doing
Oh,
one.
I've got one from Bruce. Okay, crikey. Righto.
So I'll need to talk to you when it turns up. Always stay with. Go. Okay, thank you everybody. I'd like to declare the ordinary meeting for Blayney Shire Council for September open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. In opening this meeting, I'd like to recognise the traditional custodians of this land, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. Councillors and everybody here in the chamber that have joined us tonight, just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed and that you may be recorded as part of the proceedings here this evening. Apologies, we have no apologies. We do have a leave of absence for Councillor Denton that was approved at the previous last month's meeting. Disclosures of interest. Madam GM, do we have any disclosures of interest for the business here this evening?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I have a number. The first one is from Councillor Reynolds. The report is the Tourism Events Development Program, which is item number 3 on page 15 of the business paper. The reason for the interest being that the Reynolds Garden may be used for the video production being applied for by the Millthorpe Garden Ramble, and it is a non-pecuniary, less than significant interest, as there is no direct or indirect benefit to Councillor Reynolds if the funds are provided to the Millthorpe Garden Ramble Committee. The second declaration of conflict of interest is from Councillor Alan Ewan. The report is related to the electric vehicle charging station, item number 15 on page 68. Councillor Ewan has declared a non-pecuniary interest, less than significant. He is an employee of Newcrest or Cadia, who are funding the electric vehicle charging stations. The next declaration of conflict of interest is from the Mayor, Councillor Ferguson, in the report of the electric vehicle charging stations, item number 15 on page 68 of the business paper. It is a pecuniary interest, and the reason being that Councillor Ferguson is related to one of the business owners applying for an electric vehicle charging station. The last declaration of interest is from the Director of Planning and Environmental Services, Mark Dicker, which is the draft Blayney Settlement Strategy 2020, item number 17 on page 83. It is a pecuniary interest. The reason for the interest is that Mr Dicker and his wife owns 82 Springvale Lane in Millthorpe, and this land is zoned R5 large lot residential, currently unserviced and with a minimum lot size of 4,000 metres squared. The settlement strategy includes a review of the minimum lot size for all residential zones which are unserviced within the Blayney Shire, in particular the RU5 village and R5 large lot residential zones. A pecuniary interest was declared to the General Manager prior to the review commencing, removing the Director of Planning and Environmental Services from involvement into the wider Millthorpe section, including the adjoining R5 large lot residential lands of North Millthorpe, West Millthorpe and Forest Reefs. Subsequently, Council's Manager of Planning, Senior Town Planner and Elton Consulting has specifically overseen the preparation of these sections. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam GM. Councillors will note that we do have in attendance Daniel Drum, our Manager of Planning, here this evening as well. Okay, councillors, public forum. We do have a public forum. I'd like to invite Vince Harris up to the microphone, and Vince is going to talk to us about item 17, the draft Blayney settlement strategy. Welcome, Vince. Approximately 5 minutes, and I'll give you a bit of a heads up when we get close to 5 minutes.
Mr Mayor, councillors, council staff. I'm talking this evening because as the 14th of October I won't be able to attend the Millthorpe Strategy Forum. But I'd like to talk on the actual strategy. As we survived the amalgamation of councils, I thought that was pretty good. I was very happy with that. Now I think we have a chance to progress ourselves to show how strong that Blayney Shire really is. Through this strategy, I feel that we can do that. I think that we can make it strong, viable. The other shires around us seem to be holding a little bit over the top of us, but I don't think that is necessarily what we can achieve with a little bit more expertise in what we do and how we do it, and a little bit more cooperation between everybody within our shire. Now, I'd like to talk about the development within the catchment. There's 2 designated areas within the catchment for Millthorpe, and I feel that these need to be cited or deleted, as the amount of water that is in Millthorpe that goes down through the catchment and down through past Forest Road is fairly extravagant, to say the least, and I don't think these catchment areas that you have rezoned are going to be desirable to the councils. You have to spend $1 million on Unwin Street as it is, and you keep putting these allotments into that area, it's going to cost you a lot more money. I have a suggestion for you. I don't know whether it is viable or not. It's up to the people of Millthorpe and the Shire. I think you should be rezoning Graham's Lane up into the back. It's out of the sight of the Millthorpe community. It does not interfere with the heritage or anything. There's already 4 blocks on Nygates Road, which give you an easement for your corridor. But so within this strategy, 5 acres is going to have a 1 building entitlement. So therefore, these will give you a corridor down that side where you don't have to rezone or anything because they're already there. They were done in 1910 with the actual time that they were done at that stage. The sewage runs down that road, so you don't have to have a pumping station. So therefore, it must be more viable. I don't know what it costs you to run that pumping station on Forest Road, but it costs you a lot more if you have to keep feeding that pumping station. This way, it's gravity fed. There's a 300 millimetre main that runs up that road, which supplies ample water to that area. Okay? It's on the eastern fall. All the water out of that actual catchment runs back down and comes under the road, a kilometre down the road or so, towards Blayney. So therefore, we haven't got a predicament catchment because it can go across there and there's no worries. Your green space, roads with your hierarchies that you've got now is integrated into the council for roads, allows you to have a whole new perspective of how to design and have a new kind of a satellite suburb of Millthorpe without interfering with any of that protocol of what Millthorpe desires, whether it's village committee, the people, or whatever it is. To have the ability to start fresh, know what it costs you, and how beneficial it will be because blocks of land left in Millthorpe for sale. There's not a single block for sale in Millthorpe. You've got plenty of 5 acre blocks, for sure. There's no problem with that. But not everybody wants to live on 5 acres. They want to live within that close vicinity to Millthorpe. The highway runs up there. There's no interference in relation to getting the people in and out of that area because the road leads on near the bridge. It's into their main RTA road. Therefore, it'd be beneficial to be there, to use it. So we can get funding off the RTA and everything like that to eventually help with this subdivision, if you so desire. Okay? Viaduct, Millthorpe. You go out that side and the viaduct's going to give you a heartache. Already loaded now. You've got a new subdivision going in Glenorrey Road, which is going to use that viaduct also. I think that it's going to be a problem for the council in that area. Okay?
1 minute left, Vince.
1 minute, okay. Now, the other thing I'm a little bit concerned about is boundary adjustments in relation to these 5 acre lots that you've got within these outer towns and within the 500 metres of the boundary. If somebody has got, they're going to be able to do a boundary adjustment to give themselves 5 acres to get a building entitlement. Don't know how it stands with you people. If they've got 2 blocks alongside each other, okay? To say that you haven't got road entrances and the 4 items on that, you could have trouble with the boundary adjustment. It's not in the actual thing at the moment, okay? Your visual corridor, well, It's very hard to have undulations and everything in relation to Millthorpe with your visual corridor, because you're hurting one person to give somebody else something different. I think that you need a very, very good, straight-out strategy that will help everybody in that vicinity without getting it too heavy. I think that, I don't know how you're going to make people do these visual corridors and who's going to maintain them. Okay? They're all right to have, but they're a cost. A cost to have and to put there. Okay? With that, I'll thank you and best of luck.
Thank you very much, Vince, and I guess you'll be making a formal submission during, assuming this draft gets adopted tonight, you'll be making a formal submission to the strategy
Yeah, I will be.
during the exhibition period.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I will give you a
Yep,
submission.
great. Thank you. Okay, thank you, councillors. That concludes our public forum tonight. I would now like to draw your attention to item 8. We'll go for confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting, of the last ordinary meeting. Can I have a mover that that is a true record? Councillor Reynolds has kicked off. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Ewan has seconded. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, any matters arising from these minutes from the previous meeting? No, thank you. We'll now go through now to item 2, page 13, council meeting dates. Recommendation there, councillors, to have a mover for these dates. Thank you. Councillor Newstead has moved that way and Councillor Ewan has seconded that. Any questions, comments on these dates, councillors? If not, I will put the motion. Against? Declared carried. Councillors, page 15, item 3, the Tourism Event Development Program. The recommendations there 1 and 2. Have a mover for these recommendations. Councillor Somervale would like to move that way. Do I have a second? Councillor Ewan has jumped in and seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments on this excellent program that is supporting these businesses? No, I think it's what it was intended for, this money, and I think these are 3 very worthwhile projects to stimulate tourism in our shire. No other questions or comments? Councillors, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Declared carried. Councillors, item 4, page 17, the Barry Bore MOU. Recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead, thank you, has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this MOU? Councillor Somervale?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, in moving this, I think councillors should be aware of the reasons behind the move to sign up something formal between the council and the Barry Community Supplementary Bore Incorporated. The council has 2 roles here. Council is both a supplier of the raw water from its bore to the Barry community, but it's also a regulator that has to ensure compliance under the Public Health Act by private water suppliers. So it's got 2 roles. And until the issue came to light not so long ago when we got funding to replace the community bore, it wasn't entirely clear just what was going on in Barry with their reticulation system. And what has now become clear is that there's a risk that some of this water is being used for human consumption. And the purpose of the MOU is to squarely put it on the Barry Bore community to make sure that the water that council supplies is not used for human consumption or purposes connected with human consumption. Council, the way I see it, doesn't want to get involved in being a policeman in relation to this, because council doesn't supply the water to the community. The Barry Bore Committee, which is an incorporated body, supplies the water. So what council really needs to do is make sure that the Barry community understands its responsibilities and complies with them, and the MOU gives council the power to come in and effectively audit what's being done. rather than council try to do it itself. So, with those few comments, I would recommend this motion to councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Very good overview of this issue. Councillor Reynolds, question, comment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a difficult one. And as it stands at the moment, I'm probably against this MOU, not because of the document, but because of a lot of unknowns and a lot of unknown questions that I have as a councillor. I'm very worried about insurance. I wonder, and I haven't seen either way, whether the organisation is constitutional, who are the office holders, whether they've put in their annual declaration to the government. And in the way that it's written, time frame. There's actually no time frame or that this has to be complied with. So even if someone signs it tomorrow, I can't see that it's 3 months or 6 months that they must come back with an audited report. I also wonder with the councillors insurer whether they would be happy with this MOU. I also, from a community point of view, with regard to bore access, every other bore in the Shire, an individual has to pay a fee to gain access to the bore. In this case, they don't pay a fee to council. I do understand that we may have some form of other contract or agreement with the Barry Bore Association to pay part of the electricity costs, but I would rather see an agreement with each of the users that they pay a fee. Otherwise, it's unfair for example, Neville or Newbridge users or any of the other bores from Blayney through to Forest Reefs and Mandurama or Lyndhurst to have to pay a fee, and these individuals don't have to pay a fee. And I'd rather see an agreement with each individual acknowledging liabilities, and again, it would take a lot more effort from council, but on the other side, the risk to council, if something were to go wrong with contamination, which is highlighted in this report that could well go wrong, the risk where I see it would come back on council itself. Particularly if the individuals within this organisation have, whether they have insurance or not to actually cover them or to cover, from what I understand, they're a tier 2 organisation when it comes to an incorporated association and actually don't need insurance. So there's potentially no coverage. So I'd rather delay this report, find out some more information, the questions I have just asked, before we actually make a decision on this, so that there's more clarity for myself as a councillor, and I don't know whether there'd be a seconder to move to delay it, there may not be, until we actually can get more clarity over some of these issues, and particularly in talking with maybe some legal representation from a council point of view, but also our insurer, as council's insurer, about any potential liability and protection for the community and our insurer if we do sign this MOU. So I'm happy to move that we defer, but and see if there is a seconder to then debate deferment of this MOU.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reynolds, for raising those issues. So Councillor Reynolds is, if you like, moving an amendment to defer this. Here's a seconder, I believe, in Councillor Kingham. So we're now going to discuss the worthiness, if you like, of deferring this item. I know you have brought up several points around insurance, around time frame in particular. My understanding is that we are recognised by their insurer, and our insurers recognises what's going on. This still obviously needs to be adopted by the Barry Association as well. So I'll be interested to see if they have any issues with the MOU as well, as far as what's in here currently. But to defer it, I guess, is on the table. Anybody would like to have any comment or questions about deferring this item?
I do want to talk about, Mr Chairman, the point 7 talks about the Barry community taking all reasonable steps to ensure it's not used for human consumption. My understanding, it is now used for human consumption. So I'd be interested to know what those steps are before I agreed to it.
Well, the audit, so one of the key messages in the MOU is to undertake an audit. Now, admittedly, as Councillor Reynolds has highlighted, a timeframe around that could be more appropriate, but an audit of each individual residence is what we're expecting the committee to undertake, to identify each residence to see if they are actually connected incorrectly to what the expectation is. Now, until that's done, I guess we really don't know, Councillor Kingham. So that's probably the main tool or the main process to understand exactly what's going on with each individual premises, is to have an audit. And I guess that'll be, I would suggest, without preempting anything, there'll be an arrangement between the association and council to see how that audit's undertaken and what are the protocols and what's the expectation, and let alone who might undertake that audit. But that is a key message or a key undertaking in this MOU, regardless of all the other issues. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I guess my position on the amendment is that I would oppose it. I think we ought to get on and sign this. So that's where I'm coming from. Just to answer Councillor Kingham's query about we think or we know people are actually drinking this non-potable water. So what are they going to do to stop it? Now, the point about Clause 7 is that we're not telling them what they've got to do. They've got to work out themselves what they will do, and we can then come in and check what they've done. The report that came with the MOU in the business paper mentions 8 or 9 different things which were talked about at the meeting council had with the Barry Ball community as to things they can do. Signage at the reservoir, an audit of connections, for example, checking whether there are any residences in Barry that are connected to the Barry Bore reticulation network that don't have rainwater tanks, for example, which is a probably good indication that they might be consuming the water. An acknowledgement from everyone connected to the system that they're not going to use it for potable purposes. Ending the constitution of the committee, including statements that the water is not potable on their annual invoice, which they pay to be part of the system, and so on. So there's various things they can be doing. It's up to them to decide what to do, to notify council what they've done, and council then, under Clause 7, has a right to request advice council in writing from time to time of those steps. That's the steps taken to make sure it's not used for human consumption, or to do so on written request from council. So to deal with the point about the time limit, I think Councillor Reynolds raised, there is no time limit, but council can impose a time limit by saying, what have you done? And putting a time limit on complying.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. I guess I'd like to maybe just pick up on some of the points that legitimate points that Councillor Reynolds has made. If you look at the dot points, page 18, which covers the signage at reservoirs, the audit of all the connections, which we've spoken about, which is probably the key element of this MOU. An acknowledgement from all the householders as far as the connections, that they are for non-potable use. The Constitution is to restrict its functions to non-potable supply, so they need to amend that. All connected households to be members as a condition of receiving water, which is very important because by being a member, they are by default acknowledging the MOU and come under their insurance. They have insurance. Council is identified in their insurance. Part of the annual charge allocated will be in a membership fee, annual invoice to include statement re non-potable supply annually. And of course, this MOU is to acknowledge the actions above. So I guess I'd be interested in Councillor Reynolds commenting on those points in regards to the concerns that you've raised, and Do you feel those concerns? Councillor Salval has touched on the timing, which is in our control, which is in this case probably beneficial to us. A bit open-ended, yes, but it gives us flexibility. The insurance part, we are acknowledged in their insurance. The audit is important because I too have concerns about we can't have the status quo continue. We need to actually really know ground truth, what's happening on the ground there. We don't know, it's all talk. But we all, not only in our interest or in the interest of the council, as Councillor Reynolds has highlighted, but also for that community as well. This is a really important asset for that community, which goes without saying, but it needs to be managed the best possible way that this committee and that community aren't exposed to any problems with the water that is delivered to those properties. So Councillor Reynolds, maybe I'd appreciate you reflecting on these points, or whether they alleviate any of your concerns.
Before I assume you want me to sum up, as in a right of
Look,
reply?
I'm happy to do suspend standing orders at the moment, which you'd like to do. This is an important, I'm happy to have a bit of a dialogue on this. We won't spend all night on this because we have some other important things to consider, but more than happy to come to a resolution here tonight. This has been going on for a fair while. I'm fairly keen to get this MOU to the committee and get their feedback. So I'd appreciate any more comments.
Okay, well, I'm happy to make some comments, Mr Mayor, and we may be able to come up with a solution that can move all parties forward. With regard to an audit of all connections, I would like some form of time frame. I'm totally against open-ended because, as you've highlighted and Councillor Somervale's highlighted, the General Manager has previously highlighted, this has gone on for a long period of time. We're trying to move towards a resolution, and I congratulate both the General Manager, yourself, and Councillor Somervale for moving this forward and developing an MOU. I'd like to see a time frame, though, put on it, at probably maximum 4 months, which I think is, pushes you out to the end of the year to do the audit. The second point is, so we do an audit, but there's actually nothing to say, if we find that 20 of the 32 houses are using it for portable purposes, what happens? There's nothing actually in this MOU to say they will be disconnected or they have to, put in another tank or something like that. And that's where I think this lacks that. Yes, we can be the policeman and say, yes, we acknowledge that that the Barry Boar Association can be the policeman and acknowledge that maybe 20 people that's if they're telling that, as in everyone is 100% accurate, and they're not saying that, yes, we've got one tank, but somehow we're dividing the water out of that tank to our house. But then whether you have a disconnection clause or how we progress from there with this MOU. So there's nothing really to say there, and I'm happy if there is a solution, if there is to look at that. That's probably the time frame of the audit, and B, then what you do in finding those residents that are using it for portable purposes, because then we know as a council that there are a number of individuals, and if there is an issue, then we could be potentially liable as far as I see. Again, others may disagree with that. So as in, if the General Manager or Councillor Somervale or yourself have a solution with those two areas, I'm probably happy to withdraw the amendment and proceed with the original motion.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I might ask the General Manager to comment.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Kingham, or councillors, what's very important about this MOU is that Council needs to have an arm's length relationship with the delivery of that water to the reticulated network in Barry. So whilst we acknowledge that there may be people connected there now using it for potable purposes, the more we get involved in the management of it and the finding of solutions or the auditing or the care and control of it, the relationship between Blayney Shire Council and the Barry Community Supplementary Board Committee becomes intertwined, and we become one. And we don't want to become one because we want that separation of powers, I guess, or separation of what each of our services are. And our service is the delivery of that raw, unpotable water supply. their service is the reticulation network. So we need to be on the side, and this MOU is one way of creating that separation and providing that framework by us, supporting them, and yes, we will support them with the steps involved, but we're not going to be the ones undertaking the audit, writing out the purchase orders, paying consultants. That needs to be their role to do that. Time frame, this network's been in since the 1990s, so that's 20 years. If we can solve it in 4 months, I think that's optimistic. I would suggest if we could have this resolved 12 months, that would be great. But I really think 4 months with COVID, with the impacts of the drought coming into Christmas, recognising the type of community it is, if you do find what the audit reveals, there will need to be a proposal put to someone or to the community about how they're going to resolve that. And it's important that we facilitate that process as opposed to, because otherwise if we put some demands there that they can't achieve, we might end up with a water supply, and I don't want Blayney Shire Council to have that reticulated water supply.
Okay, thank you, Madam GM. I do, though, think there is, picking up Councillor Reynolds, there's some merit on a time frame, I think, because it does focuses the Barry Committee, because, as the General Manager has mentioned, at the end of the day, it's their roles to undertake. So I would certainly look at, I'd be supportive of putting 12 months in there, because that way there is a number. And as far as the audit's concerned and what comes out of it, if there's any breach that's found, well, obviously they'll be in breach of the MOU, that is the committee, because each member will be each user will be part of my understanding anyway, please correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Sonneval, each user will be a member of the committee, have to be a member of the committee, and by default, if they are found to be not using the water properly, they are then in breach of the MOU. So that, I guess, is the trigger to have that conversation around what happens if somebody is found to be not using the water appropriately, because they will be in default of this MOU. That's my understanding of it. So there is a mechanism there. Is it that detailed about what will happen if someone is discovered? No, it's not. But again, as the General Manager says, it really is, we're saying to the board committee, well, if you find someone who's in breach, what are you going to do about it? Because you're signed MOU to say to us that you're guaranteeing there is nobody using that water. Again, it's putting it back on them. We're not coming up with the solutions. We could certainly come up with solutions, but we're really probably not, as the General Manager has explained. It's in the interest of that committee and that community to have the solutions. They have control and responsibility for it. Otherwise, I'll just walk away from it and just leave it to us, which we do not want. I think some sort of time frame focuses the mind of this committee. It's a volunteer committee. Things happen very slowly. I think 4 months is probably nowhere near long enough for what it's going to take by the time they get it and go through it and come back to us, and then let alone undertake some of the initiatives in it. But I certainly wouldn't hurt to put some time frame on it to focus the mind of the committee, because as we know, 3 months turns into 6 months pretty quick, especially over Christmas.
The question there, Mr. Mayor,
Councillor.
and I think we're moving towards a resolution here, so I'm happy to look at 12 months. What is the scenario there if nothing happens in 12 months? Do we turn off the bore in 12 months and say that we disconnect you, or as in there's got to be something at the end, otherwise this will just go on forever. So I'm not suggesting we turn off the bore, but they need some form of carrot or potentially stick at the end to actually do this audit, and you hope that they will do it. The other question that I did bring up earlier was, in any other community across any other landholder, farmer, or in the villages of Neville or Newbridge, if they want to get access to the bores in those communities, they have to pay a fee to council. These people are not paying a fee to council to be connected. So how would it look, or does it look, if we're playing favourites to some members of the community and giving them free access outside of the pumping charges, the electricity charges, and other members of the community are having to pay a fee? And I know there's been a lot of complaints about having to pay this fee. I've received some phone calls about paying the fee. So I'd like us to look at some form of resolution there. It possibly could be outside the MOU, that each user that stays connected pays some form of fee, or this organisation for each user pays some form of fee back to council. And it may just be the cost of the electricity. I don't know the exact cost versus how much we would gain in revenue if it was the same charge that we charged each member of the community in the other communities to access the bore. So I'd like us to look at that as a fee, but I'm happy with 12 months as long as we have some form of, at the end of 12 months, something happens if this audit is not completed.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I think that's more than fair and reasonable. And yes, the issue you raise about the payment, I think that's definitely worth looking at. Obviously, they are the committee looks after, through the fees they charge to the users, their electricity bill and the maintenance and ongoings. But I guess outside of this, there is a case. One could look at the actual cost of delivering that raw water initially. So thank you for bringing that up. So, Councillor Reynolds, in the interest of moving this along, as opposed to deferring it, would you happy to include the 12-month time frame that will...
I said I'm happy as long as we have a time frame.
So the seconder, you're happy with that? We might have the minutes indicate that we'll withdraw the amendment to defer and add second dot point being that the MOU will be we need to
Reporting in a 12 months, within a 12-month time frame?
Or the audits be conducted within a 12-month time frame.
yeah, well, that's the key. All the other stuff, the signage, all that's a no-brainer. That'll happen pretty easily. So let's have the audit be conducted in a 12-month time frame, which I believe is not unreasonable.
I'll just ask a quick question, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Newstead.
How is this different to, say, somebody from Neville who has a 1,000-litre pot, they go and fill it up, they take it home, they pump it into their tank, they go back, they fill up their pot again, go and fill up their tank?
It's totally different, because those people who get the 1,000 litres, they don't take it home. They don't take it home. It's for livestock and for emergency and other things. It's not for potable. There's a sign on every single... I know what you're saying, but it's not... doesn't happen, as far as we're concerned. So, the amendment now is that the MOU includes that the audit be undertaken in a 12-month time frame. Again, moved by Councillor Reynolds, and I suggest supported by seconder Councillor Kingham. Any questions or comments about the 12-month time frame? Everybody pretty comfortable with that? Okay, then I will put that amendment. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. And we go to the main recommendation there now. I will, no further comment on that. I will now put the other recommendation. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, thank you, councillors. Council, now draw your attention to item 5, page 24, the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference Motion, IPART Rating Review Mining Rate. Recommendation there, I will just get a mover and seconder first. I have a mover. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Somerville, thank you. Madam GM would like to make a comment before I ask for...
Mr Mayor,
discussion.
my apologies for the business paper. The author was actually Councillor Somerville, not myself. So I just wanted to make that note that Councillor Somerville contributed to this report and the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam GM, and a very well-written report, Councillor Somerville. Very good, actually. So, councillors, there we have it. We know that this issue is being discussed in other councils around New South Wales in preparedness for the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference. I would suggest that our motion will be, recommendation, if approved by council, will be put together with all the other motions as one item at the conference. Councillors, any questions or comments? It's a great report, well written, hits the target. Councillor Somerville is the author.
Well, yeah, I just encourage councillors to support this motion. This IPART review into the local government rating system's been around for a long while, 4 years, and there's been some really hot issues which were raised, including changing the valuation method from unimproved value to capital improved value, which was a major debate. It's gone on for quite a while. This particular recommendation, which has been given the moniker number 34, I think has just slipped under the radar. I think IPART decided that, based on a Victorian model, that it seemed like a good thing to do. I think one of the problems about the Local Government Act in Victoria is there's not too many mines in Victoria, and I suspect not too many local government councils in Victoria have a mining rate, so it didn't really matter too much in Victoria. But depending on how the government sees fit to implement this, on its face, for a council like ours, it could mean a loss of revenue of between 1.5 and 2.5 million, depending on how you calculate it. And we don't know how the government intends to calculate it. The government said they agree with the recommendation without indicating why they agree or how they intend to give effect to the recommendation. So we're just up in the dark. I think one of the telling things is that our Local Government Act already has a power in the government to make a regulation limiting mining rates to a certain multiple of business rates. There's a power there already, so if the government thinks that some council is abusing their ability to charge mining rates, in effect a profits tax rather than a local government rating tax, the government's already got power to do something about it anyway. And I think that's probably one of the telling arguments which Local Government New South Wales can use to lobby not to adopt this recommendation. But as you'll see from the recommendation, the approach is to lobby the government to either not implement the recommendation at all. In other words, just think about this. I don't think you've thought about it very much. It's a silly thing. Or to engage with all the affected councils. And there's probably not too many councils, we would be one, that are potentially affected, which is probably why the mining and energy related councils have not got too excited about doing anything about this. We want them to engage with all affected councils before they implement the recommendation, so they can understand just what impact it is going to have. With those comments, I urge councillors to support this.
As you've highlighted, this is an absolute critical issue. This has the potential of impacting our dollars. So very critical, and it's very consistent with our previous submissions, as mentioned in Councillor Somerville's report. We have written during the exhibition period this, so it's very consistent with our position all along. It's a very well-written report, and we're hoping that with support from other councils and indeed the mining-related and energies association, that we can get some satisfaction from the government, at least re-looking at this. Councillor Reynolds has
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and fully endorse Councillor Somerville's both report. Thank you very much for writing a comprehensive report, and Councillor Somerville's. I do wonder whether we should be actually approaching particularly our local member who is currently acting as the Deputy Premier to highlight the potential impact, if we haven't already, to this council. It's interesting when you look at across the state, it's not just this council, there are a number in the Hunter Valley that will be impacted, as in coal mining in particular, but you look at even Cabon Council, our neighbouring council, I think it earns over $1 million in rates from the Cadia Valley operations, through to probably Cobar, even Dubbo Council. Again, my microphone seems to be cutting in and out. I'll try and eat it or get closer. So there are a large number, but we would probably be more impacted than most. In looking at that table, I think we're about the third or fourth most in rates of any council. When I saw this, when the recommendation first came out, as in it being alarm bells, and as Councillor Somerville said, I think it was, microphone is definitely cutting in and out. 2.8 million, I think, is the maximum, detrimental impact. The other thing with Victoria, they don't have rate pegging either. So they can adjust their rates and gain revenue, whereas we can't adjust our rates within that rate pegging. Whether we'd be allowed to adjust and claim 2.8 million off the rest of our ratepayers, the rest of our ratepayers may not be very happy if that worst case scenario was to take place. So I do hope that we could at least approach the local member who's the acting Deputy Premier to actually highlight the... And you also do wonder whether Lithgow Council may also, in his electorate, also be impacted because of coal mining. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Yes, I have had have certainly brought this issue up with our local member verbally, but I would suggest that we should formalise that with a letter to the to our local member, and indeed the Minister for Local Government as well, in the short term between the local government conference. If I'm sure councils would support that. Yep. Councillor Somerville.
Yes. Don't want to close the debate, but I will just comment that in fact the Mayor did raise this at a meeting of the joint organisation down in Cowra only within the last 3 or 4 weeks. Steph Cook, member for Cootamundra, was there. She took an interest in this. We've followed up since with her and provided her with a lot of information as to why we're worried about this, and it would be probably useful if we followed it up and gave her a copy of this particular business paper with the background in it as well. So, yes, it's a good idea to get our local member involved, but I do know that Steph Cook is already on the job.
It's a very good point, Councillor Somerville, because she was totally unaware of the potential impact that this might have. Certainly support that. Okay, thank you, councillors. Any other questions or comments? We have a mover, we have a seconder. No other questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. And thank you again, Councillor Somerville. Okay, councillors. Item 6, page 28, Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference motion, emergency management reform. Recommendation there, 1 and 2. Lots of recommendations there, councillors. Do I have a mover? These two recommendations. Councillor Newstead has moved that way, and Councillor Ewan, I believe, has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments? Again, well-written report. Madam GM would like to comment, I can tell.
Mr Mayor, I didn't write this report either. The Director of Infrastructure Services did through contacts through IPWIA. So any questions, you need to divert those to the Director of Infrastructure Services, not myself.
That's right. She's not taking credit for it at this stage.
No.
So, indeed. So, councillors, any questions or comments, please direct them to our Director. Pretty good report, pretty self-explanatory. Again, very important. This is an ongoing issue, as we know, of emergency services, and I guess at some stage it's going to have to come to a head, and this will just be another opportunity for us to raise our concerns in regards to the future of emergency management in our shire. No other questions or comments? I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. The councillors now move through to item 7, page 32, report of council investments as at the 31st of August. Recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Kingham has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Somerville, thank you. A second that. Any questions or comments in regards to this report? Councillor Reynolds.
Just one quick question, or a comment that it's great that we've got $17.5+ million at the end of last month in investments. I assumed one of our bigger ratepayers actually came on board and paid a lot up front to put us in a better position. So I don't know if the General Manager can advise us whether that took place or not.
To the Director, I believe.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice because I'm not aware that they have. So I'll take that on notice.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Any other questions or comments, councillors, regards to the council investments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, item 8, page 37, the amendment to the Code of Conduct and Procedures. There's recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reynolds has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments regards to this report, to these amendments to the Code of Conduct? Pretty straightforward. If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Right, councillors, now move through to page 43, item 9. Very good item, good story this one. Sale of lot 12, Streetfield Close, second time around, but recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kingham has moved that way, and I think Councillor Reynolds or Ewan maybe. Councillor Ewan has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments on this item, the sale of the last lot at Streetfield Close? Councillor
Chairman,
Kingham.
I'd like to thank the staff for administering the sale of these lots. We had a vision that it was needed, and but the staff actually bring it all about, and I'd like to thank them for their efforts in concluding the sale of the whole lot.
I certainly support those comments, Councillor Kingham, when you think of the work that went in before that, and then for our staff to actually build the subdivision as well. I believe they enjoyed doing that in the middle of Blayney. Something quite special, something we haven't done in a long, long time. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and again, congratulations to the staff. A great project, and showed that there was demand for all of those lots in Streetfield Close. And hopefully now the private developers, I was looking at one of the developers over on prices, and I noticed Bulldozer's working again, so hopefully some more blocks will come online very shortly. I was wondering whether, so the community can see the overall outcome of this project, whether a final report might come back to council once this last block is sold and sealed and delivered, just on the project, so the community can actually see what council did do over the time period and show how successful it was, without creating too much work for our staff, but just an overview of the project in case council ever looks at another project, then we have something documented on, and maybe even some of the trials and tribulations that we could have, or at least have them in the background, whether they're actually made public, but at least some form of document on the overall project and its success.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I'm sure that would be totally appropriate. I would imagine the GM would be keen to put up a final report anyway, but I notice taking notes on that, so very good. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item, Streetfield Close? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, item 10, page 45, minutes of the Blayney Shire Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held 3rd of September. Recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Councillor Somerville has moved the recommendations. Do I have a second? Councillor Reynolds has jumped in and seconded that. Questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My biggest concern, and I have been highlighting it for a time period, and I've noticed the Audit Committee has been discussing it, is cybersecurity, and particularly our organisation, protecting our organisation. So it's great to see it's on the radar, and staff are working with the Audit Committee to try and reduce our risk. There's never going to be no risk, so I again congratulate both staff and the Audit Committee for taking this up, because it is a huge risk to the organisation if someone got into our organisation and caused harm to ourselves. And I know it's on I think it's the state government, but even the federal government's agenda to make sure that councils do have a higher level of cyber security. So well done on that particular area of investigation.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I'll certainly agree with those comments. Councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors. We now have item 11, page 55, and that's the Director of Infrastructure Services monthly report. Recommendations their report be received and noted. Do I have a mover? Councillor Newstead, thank you, has moved that way. Councillor Ewan has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this report and all the work that has been completed in the last month or so? Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a few questions from me. The recycled water pipeline, which is well underway, which is great to see. We discussed it at one of our workshops when we were talking about the recycled water treatment plant itself, whether this pipeline ought to be a sewer fund asset or a general fund asset. I think up till now we've been assuming it would be a general fund asset, and I think one of the conclusions was probably it ought to be a sewer fund asset, so that the sewer fund recycles the water, distributes it to offtake points at Napier and at King George Oval and so on. So my only question there is the paperwork for the grant we got to do the pipeline and the various financial, all the bookwork and all that sort of stuff, is that now consistent with the sewer fund owning the pipeline? Maybe that needs to be taken on notice.
Question, Mr Director?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think we'll take that one on notice.
I think we decided it's probably the best thing to do. I just want to make sure the paperwork reflects that. That was the question.
Yep.
I think I've got another one somewhere. Yes, assets. The report, staff are updating additions to Council's asset management system and trialling depreciation reports for the September quarterly budget review. Does this include the result of investigations in relation to remaining useful life of assets? Will that be something which will be finalised by the September QBRS?
Director?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there is work underway. We're having a peer review undertaken of our transport asset class prior to finalising the financial statements. With regards, sorry, what was the other?
Well, will the result of our consideration of depreciation, including remaining useful life, be all finished by the time of the September QBRS?
I'd have to take that on notice or refer to finance on that. So,
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's the plan.
Good, good. Final question. The Richards Lane vegetation project, which is fantastic. I see the Millthorpe Village Committee got a grant and that Council's got to do a bit of work in connection with that. Did Council know that the Millthorpe Village Committee were applying for this funding?
through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we did.
You did, okay, that's fine. I could remember the other occasions where they've applied for grants and successfully received grants, and it turns out that there's a fair bit that council needs to do to help deliver the project. So when I read that, I thought, I hope this is not another one where we didn't know about it. But if we knew about it, that's absolutely fine. And that's all my questions.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm sure the people of, or the community of Neville are certainly celebrating. Hopefully work started last week. I don't know if the Director is aware yet. I haven't been to Neville recently. I'll be down that end of the Shire tomorrow, so I might pop in and see. But I think that's their first significant footpath. I think there's only a very small amount, so I'm sure that's a major construction, and hopefully goes along with the hardcourt facility that we'll start to see some movement on in the next few months to year. So that's fantastic. So more a comment there. Richards Lane, yes, the vegetation management and making it safer to walk. I haven't actually had a look at the project since its conception. The showground eastern access, great to see that we've been doing some work. I drove past the other day and we're working on that one. My question on Napier Oval, any movement now that we've started, even though it has rained over the weekend, but last week, was there any movement towards starting the Napier Oval project again, or is that still on hold until we really get dry weather?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the Napier Oval project remains on hold. The contractor engaged for that is actually continuing work on the showground access road at this point in time. So that's buying us that bit of time, and we have the extension through the funding program for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Kingham.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask a question about page 57. The work has been undertaken by various council cemeteries. The people of Lyndhurst very much appreciate the high fence surrounding the Lyndhurst Cemetery, and this is to keep out the kangaroos. And I'm wondering, as it was not mentioned, I can't recall any mention of this at the cemetery forums. It's very much appreciated. I'm not sure where the initiative came from, whether it's just residential complaints, but where would the money come from to provide that fencing?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not entirely sure, but it is certainly within our allocation. There was a budget allocation for it. So I'm not sure whether that came through our own general fund or was there a funding application? I'll ask the Director of Planning.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, we have an annual allocation for capital and for maintenance in our cemeteries, and the fencing works came out of that fund.
Well, it's great, but I didn't think we had a maintenance budget that big. I'm just really...
We've been saving up for a fair while, Councillor Kingham.
And it's very much appreciated, but I can't ever remember it being raised at the cemetery forum, and I'm just wondering how it managed to be able to come out of the cemetery forum's budget.
Mr Director.
Mr Mayor, firstly, cemetery forum doesn't have a budget, but mainly we haven't had a cemetery forum for a while now.
Yes.
This issue's been bubbling away for a while from some private residents. So probably over the last 12 to 18 months, I'd suggest. A lot of council staff have been out there, including senior staff, to try and resolve this matter, which is getting quite serious.
It sounds like a good outcome.
So, Mr Mayor, if I can follow up my question on cemeteries, the petition that I've been receiving from the Neville Toole family over the damage caused to graves from a branch coming over, now they want the tree removed. Have we been able to make any progress on removing the tree that's likely to fall on graves in the Neville Cemetery?
Mr Director?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that request did come through my department. My staff went and inspected it with a tree surgeon, and I believe the tree is considered healthy and there were some limbs removed.
The tree staying. Lucky for the tree.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Councillor Kingham. Councillor Reynolds.
Just just a follow-on from Councillor Kingham's comment or question, and funnily enough, I was talking about the cemetery earlier tonight in Lyndhurst and with the high fence, but I believe there are still a number of kangaroos in there and maybe still causing a little bit of damage to graves. So are we looking at potentially trying to remove the kangaroos, or are we leaving the gate open to try and see if they'll leave, or is there any form of plan to try, or are we still encountering some challenges with one of the residents lifting the bottom of the fence to allow kangaroos back into there?
Well, it sounds like we need a kangaroo removal policy from grave sites. So we better, Mr. Director, another policy in regards to kangaroo removal. So I'm not sure how they get in there. We've got a new fence.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll endeavour to remove the kangaroos, but there's no lifting of fences, I can assure you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions or comments? The Director of Infrastructure's report.
Probably not.
If not, I will put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declared carried. Item 12, page 59, proposed fee, Blayney Showground Equestrian Race Entertainment and individual riders. Recommendations are 1, 2 and 3. Councillors, Councillor Kingham has moved that way. Do I have a second? I think you, Councillor Ewan, has seconded that. Questions or comments? It's good news that we're getting plenty of people interested in our equestrian centre. Councillor Val.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is fine. I think getting fees for users is what this is all about. The user groups we've got there already for the $1,240 seasonal hire, they're all sort of community sporting equestrian people. Race entertainment, I'm not entirely sure who they are. They sound a bit commercial to me, and
It's a good question, Councillor. I asked the same, and I'm sure the General Manager will...
And it did seem to me to be an unusual person to be hiring the facility, as distinct from giving
Association,
entertainment at interval in some other event. So it didn't quite seem to fit with the other users of our community facilities.
Madam GM?
Mayor, we should have explained who Race Entertainment are. There are a couple of local riders who do trick riding and vaulting, who've performed at the Blayney show. So they're a local group, and they certainly are a community group. And we presented their request to become a seasonal user to the rest of the user groups at the stakeholder meeting, the user group meeting, and everyone agreed that they should become a seasonal user.
I believe they'll undertake training and practice and for other people who want to do crazy things on horses.
Okay, good.
Which is great. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question relates to the overall performance of the facility. We're seeing a number of user groups here, so we're receiving some revenue. And I notice in the next business item, we've actually got a budget for the two open spaces and the Bolobular walkway. I was wondering, now that we're very close to finishing this project, and hopefully by late September, early October, we'll have the other shed in, and then the power is, I think, later, but whether we can actually have an overall budget for the shed now, so we know what depreciation costs are, what projected revenue is now that we've got a number of users, and also costs with whether electricity is covered by these users, or how the budget actually comes out for this facility now that we've spent just about all the money, and we should have a fair idea how we're going to depreciate various items within, whether it's electricity, the other shed, the main shed, or the yards, or anything else. So, but overall, a fantastic facility, and it was great to see the opening of it. I'd just love to know what it's roughly going to cost the community each year now to run this facility on an annual basis.
It was certainly a great little opening considering the COVID restrictions, but the Deputy Premier certainly mentioned many a time that it was certainly one of the better ones he's seen right throughout the state. So we're very lucky to have that in our little community, again servicing the Central West. Councillors, Councillor Newstead.
Just going back to the fee structure there, I see here, like, for an individual or group horse riders, fee of $100 per hour, minimum of 2 hours. If you're a member of one of the user groups, can they go there like as an individual, even though they're in the pony club, and do they have to pay, or what's?
Yes, Madam GM.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's the intent. So we discussed with the user groups about the situation of what the facility is costing the council and what the groups are charged. And so this was one of their ideas about an opportunity for council to raise additional revenue. And so if they are a member of either of those groups, providing they have the right insurance that they're covered, they can then ride as an individual. So they're not actually riding as, for example, Orange Equestrian Club or the horse sports. They're riding as an individual but as a member of that group, but they still are required to tick some boxes in terms of their own public liability insurance. And they felt that it was a good means of council receiving some additional revenue and some usage during the week when otherwise it may not be used.
In other words, though, if, say, I wanted to go and use it, I'm not a horse rider, but I'd be probably better off joining one of the user groups. It'd be a lot cheaper way of getting around it.
We don't want individuals really using it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there are individuals, so we have individuals who are members of Equestrian Australia, where you are covered by your membership by their insurance anywhere in Australia. So that if you're not a member of these groups, you need to demonstrate that you have the right insurance.
But you're right, the logical thing is to join a horse association and enjoy the sport. So, okay, councillors, any other questions or comments regards to this item? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Declared carried. I just have to speak up a little bit because I have to report it's raining. We can hear it inside the chamber here. Okay, councillors, move now through to page 61, item 13, the open space project, strategic planning submissions. Recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments regards to this? Councillor Somerville?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very much in favour of this recommendation. I have one comment and one, I guess, request. The comment is, thinking about it, I would have preferred to have seen these two projects dealt with separately rather than bundled together. I know we've been talking about them together. We've had the same consultant helping us develop the plans, but at the end of the day, they are two quite separate projects. But that's just a comment. I'm happy to support the bundled recommendation. One of the reasons why it did occur to me that dealing with them separately might have been a better way to go is in relation to the Ballabula River project, and suddenly my screen has gone blank. I see we've got a costing of, I think it was 1.5 million for the Ballabula river walk. I'll see if my screen's come back. No, it hasn't. I'd like to see that staged. It lends itself to stage. 1.5 million is a big lick for any grant funding. It lends itself to staging, one stage being the island, for want of a better word, and the landscaping involved in that, the bridge and the picnic facilities and the bird viewing platform and all that sort of thing. And the other part of the project being the continuation of the pathway down to Heritage Park. Two quite separate projects. The only link between the two is in fact the bridge from the pathway onto the island. It does seem to me that they lend themselves to being staged. It might be a lot easier then to get some funding if we regarded that project as stage one and stage two. And they are quite different. But the infrastructure required for the landscaping of the island is quite different from the infrastructure required for the pathway. And on top of all of that, we already have funding under that drought stimulus package, 50,000 I think it was, for the willow removal around the island, so we've already got some funding towards that stage of the project. So when we start working up how we're going to get some funding for that, if we could stage that project, I would be very supportive of that. That's all.
Absolutely, Councillor Somerville, makes total sense and more practical. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I was going to say exactly the same thing. I concur with Councillor Somerville's comments about staging. I was just looking in the active movement strategy, the latest report I had back in May, and the Belubula River Walk Shared Path Stage 2, projected for 22-23, was $365,000. So there's another $1.1+ million for other projects outside of the path. Now, it may be a different route that the path eventually takes on this plan compared to what was in the active movement strategy, but I would love to see it so that we could bite off in little bites rather than 1.5 million, which is a lot when we look after our other communities. So if there are other funding opportunities in the future where, you know, we get particular funding sources, like we've just seen with the drought stimulus, both at the state and the federal level, that we might do one part of that or do the footpath part, and as Councillor Somerville said, do the island or some other landscaping or a bridge across to the island or other parts of the project in different stages. So I hope that, yeah, we could look at potentially staging it, and I'm sure this is more at a higher level concept design rather than coming down to the actual operations. I don't know if the director has any sort of further comment on that one way or the other, on whether we could potentially stage it and whether there is actually a breakdown of that $1.5 million.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. No, I think we'll definitely stage it. The opportunity to get different lots of funding in different parts of the project makes total sense. And the reality is, I'm sure we've all received feedback, is that this is probably the #1 project that our community want to see finished. They absolutely loved stage 1. I was down at IGA today and still getting feedback about how wonderful that pathway is and the improvements to Dacres Oval. It'll be even better when the fence is up at Dacres Oval. So let's not underestimate the fact that our community really would love to see this completed, and this is certainly the step in the right direction. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour? Aye. Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now item 14, page 65, Central West JO Regional Roads Signs Contract. Recommendation there. We're just going to break that up a little bit, councillors. If you look up on the screen, there's two sort of recommendations bundled in the one recommendation. So Lauren has done a good job in just separating them. Chance to read. So it's still the same recommendation. It's just a little bit clearer by having 2 points separated. Councillors, if you've been able to read that, again, it's exactly the same wording as in your business paper. I will put the motion. I will ask for a mover. Thank you. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way, I believe. I have a seconder. Councillor Ewan, thank you, has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments? Again, thank you, Councillor Somerville, for your input in this. This is one of your favourite subjects. In fact, this takes me back at least 7 years when you raised this issue as a new councillor. You were here about a month and you brought up this, I remember, this to the attention of the council at the time. And here we are 7 years later, but still trying. Comment, Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Somerville, and then Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it's been a long while and we keep plugging away. As councillors know, our concern in relation to this is simply how Centroc receives their fee for providing the service they provide. Yeah, it's been about 7 years we've been raising this. It was interrupted because the Centroc morphed into the JO, and then the JO was extended, and we decided that we'd look at it when the JO was formed, and then the Central New South Wales JO got together with 2 other joint organisations and decided they would make quite a meal out of this and get some consultants in to have a look at best practice in aggregated procurement, which is fantastic. And that's a project which has already been going on for, I think, for well over 12 months, and I think we're up to, we've done stage 1A and 1B already of 6 or 7 stages. All we're really interested in, frankly, is best practice in terms of charging a fee for the aggregator. But nevertheless, it's moving along, and I think at least Central New South Wales, JO, has committed the $150,000 funding which it got from the state government, which all JO's got. It's committed that $150,000 to its share of this project to look at best practice in aggregated procurement. So it's moving along. Hopefully, when the project is finished, I hope I'll still be on council to see the result of the best practice.
Hopefully you will be, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is about this best practice, and particularly the contract management fee, and I don't know whether the General Manager or Councillor Somerville may have an idea of how we're actually going to determine this contract management fee through a transparent and accountable basis, as in how we're actually going to do that to so both parties benefit from it. And I do have another question after that.
Sorry, I was just distracted. Was that?
Yeah, well,
Sorry,
how
question to
will the
Councillor
contract management
Somerville.
fee? I mean, there's two ways of doing it. The percentage which is charged at the moment is a percentage which is in fact paid to the JO by the contractor, not by the councils, and it's a percentage of the spend. The bigger the spend, the more the JO gets. The other way of doing it is for the JO simply to charge a fee for managing the procurement and the contract administration, so that, for example, on this particular contract, the JO would say, well, our fee to all the participating councils is $50,000, and that's your share. You pay that to the JO, the councils pay that to the JO, and we get a cheaper rate from the service provider because they don't have to pay the percentage to the JO. That better reflects the actual cost of providing the service. The 2% might bear no particular relationship to how much effort the JO put into running the procurement process and administering the contract. It's a fairer and more transparent way of, in my view, of costing aggregated procurement services than the Commission, which has got the sort of the sniff of a bit of a kickback or a commission or something like that. So anyway, it's something which hopefully will be find its way into one of the chapters on best practice.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Reynolds?
And this is probably to the Director. With regard to this particular contract, if there is a fee, are we actually going to be better off? I think it was Wedden doesn't use this service. I know it's only a small council, but again, a rural council similar to ourselves. Does the Director believe that we actually get economic benefit out of going as a joint tender, particularly for something like these road signs, or I think they're road signs, in this case, which we wouldn't use a huge amount, but I again have no idea on the budget amount that we would use as opposed to going ourselves.
For you, Mr. Mayor, the advantage the contract provides us is the ability to satisfy a number of procurement requirements by being part of a panel or a supplier list, which some organisations refer to it as. From a monetary point of view, comparatively, I couldn't answer for you whether it's better or not, but when you aggregate the amount of money that is spent by all the councils, I would suggest we do get a timely and a valuable benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds, and it's important we get this right because it is an important revenue stream for the JO to make it sustainable, so it is important that they are right in regards to their contracts when they become providing those contracts to councils. Okay. 1, 2, we have a mover, we have a seconder. No other questions or comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, now move to item 15. Myself and Councillor Ewan have declared an interest, so we will leave the chamber and I'll invite Councillor Kingham if he could take the chair for this item. You could leave,
For me?
yeah,
Okay.
it's fine if you like.
Councillors, item 15, page 68, electric vehicle charging stations. Do I have a mover? Councillor Newstead and Councillor Somervale. Any comments or questions? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to congratulate Council on this initiative. I do like the very comprehensive funding agreement that has been written that appears to make acquittal quite comprehensive, so they have to show that they've used. I expect that it'll be followed through. Probably a question maybe to the General Manager or is it Director, probably Director. Were there other organisations or businesses that did apply, or was it just these 4 that applied for this funding?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were actually 6, but 2 of the applicants actually didn't satisfy the criteria to proceed forward.
Further question before Councillor Somervale asks his. Will there have to be some co-funding, or does the funds that we make available enough to cover these charging stations, which I assume are the cheaper type, which are much longer to charge the vehicle? So is there a co-contribution, or is it going to be 100% from council? And also, what sort of time frame do these organisations have to get these installed?
This is for the Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, my apologies. There is obviously the Cadia Valley allocation and council's allocation to this. Each of the applicants' sites have been inspected and a costing determined based on what would suit the site, so that you're not taking too much electricity out of the network at each location, and based on that, the funding available it's within budget, I should say, the expenditure.
Thank you. Further questions?
I'd
Mr.
just
Somerville?
make a comment, Mr. Chair. When this project first came up and Cadia was keen on providing some funding for this, and council was as well, the original intention was that council would actually acquire these charging stations. When that was worked through, a much more sensible solution was simply to, which is why this is on the agenda tonight, was to provide a donation to the businesses for them to actually acquire. And the reason for that is that the businesses then have a direct relationship with the supplier, so it's the businesses who need to worry about the warranties. Council doesn't end up owning the equipment. We don't have to maintain the equipment. We don't have the risks of ownership of the equipment. We don't have to worry about the issue of what happens when the business changes hands or the property where the equipment's been installed gets sold on to someone else. And we're capping the costs of installing it. So for all sorts of reasons, this is a much more sensible way of achieving the outcome we want and protecting council's position.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Further question? Councillor Reynolds?
Mr. Chair. I just had one further question, probably through to the director or to the general manager. Originally, when we made the decision, Blayney was going to get a charging station and potentially behind the chamber here. Are we still looking council fleet that eventually we may look at some form of charging behind the council chamber, whether for public or at least for council vehicles down the track?
Through you, Mr. Chair, only in the last week we've been having discussions around that. In the last few months we've talked about our own light fleet. The manager of water and wastewater special projects and I sat in on a teleconference or a webinar last week with regards to EV in your heavy vehicle fleet. At this point in time, that's a little further off for us. It's certainly something that's coming. We need to do quite a bit more research on our own usage and so forth. It looks very good on paper and would work in a metro area, but when you consider distances from charging points and turnaround and all that, it's a different business case for us. With regards to charges out here, it's certainly something that remains on our agenda.
Thank you. Further questions or discussions? No? Write a reply to the mover? Not needed. The motion, item 15, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Declared carried unanimously. All that work, did you, Dave? Good outcome.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kingham. Councillors, now draw your attention to item 16, page 79, the minutes of the Blayney Shire Access Advisory Committee, held 29th of July. Recommendations there, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Councillors, Councillor Reynolds has moved that way, I believe. Do I have a seconder for these recommendations? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, questions? Well, it's Councillor Somervale and then Councillor Reynolds, who is the alternate on this committee, I believe. Yes, Councillor Somervale.
Well, maybe this might be a question to Councillor Reynolds, I'm not sure. Item 3, which is a resolution that the council purchase an additional aquatic wheelchair for Centrepoint. Just having a look at the minutes of the committee, the issue was raised and the action was that the director was to seek quotes for an aquatic wheelchair and provide further feedback, support and circulate to the committee for comment. And then the recommendation was that council purchase the aquatic wheelchair. I don't know whether we've got the quotes yet. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I know that if it's that equipment on the side of the pool which lowers a wheelchair into the pool, that doesn't look like anything very cheap, and it looks like the whole thing is part of the fabric of the pool. So if we pass this resolution, are we effectively writing out a blank cheque to go ahead and buy a second aquatic wheelchair?
To take start, and then I'll pass over to the director because I'm aware that he has also been in discussion. From my understanding, we probably don't even need to pass this recommendation, but I think it's within discretionary expenditure within the budget of Centrepoint. The reason why there was a move for a second wheelchair was the supports on the side, I believe. The wheelchair that we have doesn't have the side supports, whereas there was a move to try and get a second wheelchair that would give more accessible or access for the individual that sort of had arm movement, etc., or some arm movement. And from what I understand, the director was looking at ones that were compatible with the pod, which is the term of the equipment that lowers the wheelchair into the pool. But the director may have further comment to make on that particular issue.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Do you have a further comment to make on?
Through Mr. Mayor, so there's a couple of comments. So yeah, each user is different, and the committee raised in one chair, there runs the heightened risk that a user is already in a chair. Some examples were cited. There's an Australian-made chair which is about $2,500, or there's another version of the pool pod, which I think the quote came back at $7,000. So I haven't put them back to the committee yet for a recommendation, but that's kind of the ballpark we're talking.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Councillor Somerville, are you concerned about the budget
well, I think
implications?
I was a
of
bit
number three?
confused about the difference between the wheelchair and the pod. The wheelchair just sits on the pod and gets
Yeah, I
lowered.
had the same question, yep.
Yeah, so I now don't think it's as big a thing as I thought it involved some reconfiguration of the
Yes.
whole of the equipment. So I'm not too fussed about that, and if it's within our budget, and that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm able to stay for part of this particular meeting on this night, and thank the director for taking over and chairing the second part of the meeting. One big advancement is the two primary entrance doors at the front of Centrepoint in stage one to upgrade to sliding doors, similar probably, though we don't have final design, maybe to the front of the community centre here. And then stage two, so stage approach again, other major pathways of travel with doors to give people access into the centre. That's the challenge, and the biggest concern was that someone with an accessibility issue wasn't able to get in through those doors, so they were reliant on someone else. Once they're inside, then there are people that can help, but actually to notify about access, and that has been a big issue for a number of months, both with the chair, who was unable to attend and is not here tonight as well as an apology, but also a number of members of that access committee. So that's a major advancement. To look at some of those footpaths, particularly the grade to get up onto the footpath off the road, is important again, and I know the council the staff are looking at that to get those ramps compliant, but it may take a while. It's been on the radar again, and we have also had some questions, particularly around the Lee Hostel, with regard to footpaths and access. We are in the process in the next 12 months with Uralba putting a footpath to connect with Naylor Street down Ulimore Street, so the residents there can access the village, and hopefully we're able to, in the near distant future, within the access, the active movement strategy, link up the Lee Hostel with the community as well, to put them onto the footpath network so they don't have to walk on the side of the road. We've already noted the aquatic wheelchair, and I think, and King George Oval, two representatives, Jenny McMahon and Iris Dorset, to represent the Access Committee on the King George Oval Major Upgrade Reference Group, so that access is taken into account when this project is undertaken. And I think we're going to discuss that very shortly, that project, all moving on. So that's a quick summary, Mr Mayor, of what took place and the reasons why at the last Access Committee meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declared carried. Right, councillors, now move through to item 17, being the draft Blayney settlement. We have a declaration of... part thereof in this?
Okay.
Thank you. Draft Blayney Settlement Strategy. Council's recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? Councillor Reynolds has jumped right in to move that, and Councillor Ewan has seconded that. Right, this is our second go around at this, councillors, if you remember. So open for questions or comments, and Councillor Reynolds has a question.
I'd like to start with a comment and thank particularly Daniel Drum for all the work that he's done on the modification of this document. The settlement strategy, a very important overarching document for our Shire, and some major modifications on the original document. And I'm proud to now to put my name to moving this document to put it out on public display. As we've heard tonight, there is going to be a lot of feedback, and I hope that we can have this out on display for an extended period of time with COVID, so we can consult and take all that feedback in, and that we can have meetings across the Shire. So hopefully a number of meetings in coming weeks, subject to COVID restrictions, to consult with the community about this very important document that then will feed down into things like the local environment plan if it is approved. But I think the most important thing with this document is that we get feedback from the community. The warts and all feedback, whether they like things or don't like things, and the reasons why, so that we get the best document that we can for this Shire moving forward, because it'll probably be used for a fair few years coming forth. So I commend this settlement strategy to Council and to the community, and it's now up to the community to come and provide feedback on this very important document. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. It is a very important document, and as we heard from our public forum speaker earlier, this is opportunity for the council and indeed the community to set the future in regards to planning and the growth and the development for our Shire. Admittedly, council can only do so much, but it is important that we engage the community very strongly around the elements inside this strategy, because at the end of the day, we need the support from the community. And yes, there may be some strategies in there that some do not agree with, but that's what the public exhibition period's about, and this is why we will go out to the community and engage them the best we can in what at times can be a complicated document. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I think the key to this is now going to be getting meaningful, involved community input into the document. I mean, it's an important document. It's still got a long way to go, and I think, as we heard from Vince Harris tonight, if we have community members as interested in what's in this document and as careful in thinking about different aspects of it from their own particular experience and point of view, then that will improve the document before it's finally adopted. So I thank Mr Harris for his comments earlier tonight, and I hope we have lots of other members of the community as interested in this document, so we can get the best product at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Councillors, any other question? Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I totally agree with Councillor Somerville and Councillor Reynolds. It's an overarching document that's going to, look into our future probably over for the next 15 to 20 years. So the more we can get it right, the better at this point in time. And yeah, we welcome and applaud those people that put in submissions so that we can get it as right as possible, so that it works for our Shire into the future. So I look forward to that consultation with the wider community, so we can tweak what we've have together there now, if it needs. I believe that at the end of the day, it's the wider the community that can give us some more insight into the document that maybe we haven't actually looked at that view maybe. So, yeah, look forward to it and thank the wider community, thank the wider community for the input that we hope we get from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ewan. Councillor Kingham.
Mr Chairman, I'm going to oppose the 4,000 square metres for building lots in villages at every opportunity. It's unworkable, impractical and not needed. It's only in relation to the septic system, and nobody needs 4,000 square metres to run a septic system, because it's only 50 metres of trenching plus another 50 metres needed. That's 100 square metres, at least 3,900 square metres for the horse or a ride-on mower or something to deal with. So I don't agree with that one little bit. I'm not saying it shouldn't go out for discussion, but that's, to me, that is just an unpractical position. When you've got a block in Lyndhurst for sale with 675 square metres, one-bedroomed home, what's the problem? It depends on the size of the house and the number of occupants, rather than the size of the building allotment. So my view is that as people gain income, they move from a smaller house to a larger house. Now, if they've always got to start off with 4,000 square metres, you'd obviously want to put a reasonably sized and priced home on that. Now, I don't think it's a good strategy, and I'm going to oppose it wherever I can. The other comment I'd like to make is that Lyndhurst is different to the other villages, and I would like to see a briefing session offered at Lyndhurst Memorial Hall, in addition to the ones that are outlined in the agenda. I just don't think it's appropriate to bundle Mandurama, Carcoar, Neville and Lyndhurst in the one venue. Lyndhurst has a different outlook on this, and it's got some quite large potential for houses to the south and the west, and that needs to be discussed in a Lyndhurst context, not in the context of the other three villages. The other question I have is on page 85. It says it's important to note, following public exhibition, if significant changes are proposed, the changes must only be considered minor, otherwise a public exhibition will have to be undertaken again. Now, what's minor and what's major?
We'll have to wait and see what comes.
I'm going to propose that the village has a lower requirement than 4,000 square metres. Now, as it's suggested by the EPA, I'm presuming that would be a major change. So, does that mean that the exhibition, I guess the council, I'm just not sure how this is going to work, but what I'm thinking is that we need 2 goes at this. We don't need to rush it. It doesn't need to come up before the December council meeting. We need to have another meeting in Lyndhurst, and then we need to have a discussion on the changes that have been recommended and inserted in the final document. And if they are major, which I would imagine the 4,000 square metres, I'm not quite sure how many people are going to support me, but to my way I think that's impractical. I guess it's a major change, and then I think we need to have another go at it, so that maybe it needs to go out on exhibition before the changes and then after the changes. That's my suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Kingham, and that's exactly why we're going to public exhibition, but maybe you're preempting what some of the changes may or may not be. There could be quite a few. So we just don't know, and that's why I think that decision as far as going back out will depend on what does come back in. So I think we're probably preempting whether we go back out for a second time, depending on what changes they are. We don't know. There could be some quite big change, bigger than the issue that you're dealing with. You know, there might be complete rejection of the strategy. We don't know. So I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it as far as the changes. And I think it would be appropriate to have a meeting at Lyndhurst as part of our communication strategy. I'm sure my fellow councillors would support that. And we will endeavour to the best of our ability. Our role in this is we've gone to an external independent consultant to put together an overview of the Shire. Our role, I see our role as making sure that the strategies in this plan are understood by the community to the best of our ability. That is our role, because it's complicated. A lot of it is complicated, some of it's straightforward. And regardless of whether the community accept it or not, really, we just need to make sure they understand it and what the ramifications are and what the long-term future planning. There's some really good high-level strategic strategies in this plan, I believe. But it's important that we educate the community, have the opportunity that the community understand it. Now, whether they support it or not, that's another question. But my concern after being through this a few times now is that the community doesn't fully understand the implications of it before they either support it or reject it. So our role will be to make sure that we give the community every opportunity to understand what we're trying to produce. We're trying to produce a document that says this is the plan for the next 20, 30 years for land development in the Shire. At the end of the day, it will be up to the individual landholders to create that economic benefit from what we do here, not council. But it is a very important document, and the timing is, I think we're on the up and up. There's a lot of interest in our Shire, a lot of interest in people relocating through all the reasons. It's even more critical that we get this right. And I would also like to endorse the earlier comments that we do not appreciate how much work behind the scenes our planners have put into this, especially since it was originally referred back to them. But finally, on top of what has been a very busy time, unprecedented DAs coming through council, so doing that normal work as well as giving due diligence and time to this document as well. I don't think we can overestimate how much effort's gone into it. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. I ask the director to come back into the chamber, and councillors, we do have a late report I'll refer you to. Okay, councillor, late report, item 18. Building Better Regions funding round 4, kicking goals for girls. A recommendation there, item page 2, recommendation. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ewan, thank you, has seconded that. Questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Somervale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it gives me a pleasure to propose this method of tendering for the major improvements at King George Oval. I think it's a good report that's been put together, and I think the use of selective tendering for this project is a sensible way to go. It's pretty similar to what we did for the bridge near A&L on Browns Creek Road. It worked well there. I think it'll work well here, and I think the result of proceeding in this way will be we will get the best result and the best value for money by continuing some competitive tension between at least 2 shortlisted bidders to go through and work with council and present their plans. And it's also good to see that staff have engaged prevention partners to oversee the process, because there are risks associated with running in this way, with disgruntled tenderers and so on. So having that sort of monitored by someone external to council is a smart move as well.
And I thank you, Councillor Somervale. I certainly agree. It's a very dynamic way to tender, and I think we will end up with the best possible result out of the process. And of course, the best possible change rooms. Even though it may not be as quick as Councillor Kingham would like, it does take a little bit of time, as you can tell by the time frame that's put up there, Councillor Kingham. But yeah, these things do take time, as the stakeholders have acknowledged. And Yes, and it'll happen. We'll make it happen. It's a great project. We want to get it right, and we will get it right. Councillor Kingham.
Mr Mayor, I've had to relinquish my ambition for the girls to have somewhere nice to change for next year's football season. I don't agree with it, but I'm going to accept it.
Yes, I appreciate your point, and you've made a good point, but I think the reality is it is going to take time to deliver this project, and we don't want to rush it, or least of all, run interference with the next season's football season. That would be not good, to say the least, especially after missing this year. Okay, councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this? We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, thank you, councillors. That does conclude the business here this evening. Thank you all very much for your attendance. I thank everybody who's taken the opportunity to look at this meeting on live streaming on YouTube. I'd like to declare the meeting closed. Thank you.